Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today with you. And today we are going to talk about how to pull core web vitals into a technical SEO audit and how to measure their impacts on rankings and traffic. And also, I will give you a small history about page speed. So, as you can hear, I'm from France, but I've been living in Montreal for the past 4 years. I'm currently a customer success manager for North America at OnCrawl. And prior to that, I worked as an agency consultant in an agency called Adviso, and I was working for as lead technical SEO consultant for the National Bank of Canada, which is one of the two biggest banks in Quebec. So today the presentation will be split into 4 parts. So the first one will be a quick history about the page speed and what are the core web vitals. Then I will talk about how to measure them, how to fix them, and then at the end we will have a Q&A session. If you have questions during the presentation, just feel free to ask, and I will try to answer them at the end of the presentation. And if I can't answer them today, feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn, and I will try to answer them. So the first point, core web vitals in a nutshell. Before that, being a customer success manager at OnCrawl, when Google announced that they would pull a new ranking factor, I had a lot of questions from my clients. They wanted to know how to measure that and how to pull that in an SEO audit. We will see that there are plenty of tools to measure page speed, but it's really hard to have a scalable way to measure that. Because, for instance, if you have ever used page speed insights, you can only pull one URL at a time. So if you have a website with thousands or millions of URLs, that's really hard to measure the page speed on all of those pages. In 2017, Google did a report about mobile, and they found that 53% of the mobile visitors leave a page that takes longer than 3 seconds to load. I think that stat is still effective today. In 2019, Portent, which is one of the biggest SEO agency in North America, did also a study about the site speed impact on the conversion rates and on the sales. And we can see that the first 0 to 4 seconds are so a 0 to 4 second load time is best for a conversion rate, and then the first 5 seconds of page load time have the highest impacts on conversion rates. And after that, the website conversion rates drops by an average of 4.42% with each additional second of load time. So it's not really hard to understand that site speed has a huge impact on conversion rates and sales, and more generally on the user experience and on the page experience. And that's why in May this year, Google announced that they will have a new official ranking factor, which will be the core web vitals, and more generally the page experience. So as I said, we know that page speed has a huge impact on conversion rates, but it's really hard to measure the true impacts on an SEO point of view. And yeah, so we'll see that a bit later. So first, what are the core web vitals? So if you look at the right, they are parts of signals to measure page experience. We already know mobile responsiveness, HTTPS, or things like intrusive interstitials. And they added 3 different metrics to measure specific things on the page. So the first one is the largest contentful pane, which measures the loading. Then we have the first input delay that measures interactivity. And then we have the cumulative layout shift that measures the visual stability. And I will go into more details about that a bit later. But first, so the core web vitals will measure the page experience, and it will be everywhere, so on the regular SERPs, and also it will be criteria for top stories in Google News. So it means that you don't need AMP anymore, but still you would have to work on the page speed for specifically for Google News. It will be released in 2021, and because of the COVID situation, they said that they will give 6-month notice before implementing that to the algorithm to let time to people to improve their websites. And as I said, and there is a link here on a tweet from someone, I think it's Gary Ilias from Google, that says that at the moment, site speed is still a teeny ranking factor compared to other factors, and still it will be one factor of hundreds and hundreds of signals. So I think, in my opinion, it will be, and we will see that with the technical audits, but it will not have a huge impact on SEO rankings for now, maybe in the future. But as I said, it's more about the page experience and the user experience, and also the conversion rates for e-commerce websites. But it's also important for media websites, for instance, because you want to keep the user on the page to display advertising, for instance. So I will go a bit into more detail about what are those metrics. So the first one is the largest contentful pane, and in simple words, it means how fast the page load. It's a question of rendering time of the largest video, image, or text on the page, and it's influenced by your server time, your CSS, your JS, or the client side rendering. Then we have the cumulative layout shifts, which is, in simple words, how fast the page is stable. So it's about an expect layout shift. For instance, I think we all have experience, maybe on mobile, a page where we want to click on a button, and then there is an unexpected shift, and we don't click on the button because the page is still loading. So it's not really good for the user experience. And it's influenced mostly by images that have size which is not defined in the HTML. It could also be influenced by animations. Then we have the first input delay, which is how fast the page is interactive. So when a user clicks on a button, how fast can the browser respond? And that one is mostly influenced by the JavaScript or third-party code. So how to measure in an effective way those different metrics? The first solution would be to utilize all Google optimization tools. So I'm sure that you know most of them. We have a new report in the Search Console. I have a link somewhere in the presentation to that report. We have page speed insights. We have Lighthouse, the Chrome Dev Tools, the Chrome UX reports, and there is also a new Web Vital Chrome extension. There is also the page speed API. Basically, before this year, Google had two teams to measure the site speed. So the first one was page speed, and then they also have a Lighthouse, and they gathered everything this year or last year, I think. So now, when you use the API, you have the page speed insight data, but also the Lighthouse data, which could be useful. And when you use Lighthouse or page speed insight, or even the other tools that you can use, depending on if you are not very technical, you may need a web developer who is an expert in page speed, so you can comfortably address the different issues that you have. Otherwise, it could be hard to understand the different issues that you have and how to deal with them. The second technique, which I really like, but I couldn't try it for now, is to use a script directly to push Core Web Vitals to Google Analytics. And I think it's a really good way to scale the page speed audits, because as I said before, when you use page speed insights, for instance, or even Lighthouse, you have to pull one URL at a time to do the audits. So for millions of pages, that's really hard. And that script it is production ready, so you can start to use it right now if you want. And it's from Google, and it will pull all the data about so the CLS, the FID, and the LCP on directly on analytics, which could be good to measure those different metrics. Then, because I'm representing a crawler, my clients wanted to have a technique to be able to measure Core Web Vitals with a crawler. So we are still under testing that technique, but I did an effective test for that presentation, so I will show you the demo. And basically, the goal is to get Core Web Vitals data using a Python script on the API, and then add the resulting URLs, files, and the data which is inside to a crawl, and then being able to create a segmentation to get a clear view of the situation, and then analyze the data. So before presenting you the demo, a quick note. as I said, because we can, and even with the API, because we can only measure or get data one URL at a time, it's really hard to scale. So in the script we did, we added a small delay to be able to truly crawl all the data. But as I said, the PageSpeed API is a bit slow, so it takes around 6 seconds to get data for one URL, which is a really long time if you have millions of URLs. So if you have a huge website, I would recommend to analyze the different templates that you have, not all the pages, but specific templates that you know. And that way it will be easier to get the data and to take action, because otherwise it can take a long time. And if you don't have templates, and if you have tons of pages with different templates, that will be harder. So I will share my screen. Okay. All right. So first, as I said, we created a small script that I will. So it's a Python script, and I will share it with you at the end of the presentation, so you can use it. You don't need to have a subscription to OnCrawl to use it. You can pull the data elsewhere. So first, you just need an API key. So you can enter your API key. I won't run the scripts for the presentation because it takes a long time to get the data. But I will show you the result file. So basically what we do is to pull a list of URLs that we have on a txt file. And then we ask the API to pull results about what we want. So basically the core web vitals. And we added a small delay. Where is it? I think it's here. Yeah. So because it takes a long time to get the data on a specific URL, so around 6 seconds, we added a small delay to be able to crawl all the data. And as you see here, we want to pull all of those different scores, and we are still missing some data, but we will modify the script in the next weeks. So you will be able to get all the data from the API. So then when after the script is run, we have a file like that, which basically is a JSON file. So we have all our URLs on the left, and then all the values that we want to analyze on the right. And after that, you can just upload it to Sheets, and it will work, even if it's a JSON file. And then you will have a CSV file like that. So with the URLs and the different metrics. And we want to put that into a crawl. So here it will be with OnCrawl. So basically what we do is to crawl a list of URL. So here it's the list that we have on the script too, the list here. So it's a part of our website. It was just for the experiment. So we crawl that list, and at the same time, because we have that CSV file with all the metrics, we ingest it here. Sorry. So we have a data ingestion option. So basically, the key here is to compare the URLs that we have in the file with the URLs that we crawl. And then after that, we launched the crawl. So I launched a crawl yesterday for the presentation. And then we have all the crawl data here. And I created a specific segmentation for the FCP as an example. As you can see here, we don't have high FCP pages, and I did that with our segmentation tool. So I created some rules, specific rules. So for instance, for the FCP score, for the high FCP score, I just said I want you to find pages that have a greater score than 0.80, and then it's the same for medium FCP. So it's a score between 0.55 and 0.80, and for the poor FCP, it's less than 0.55. So it's those metrics are the metrics we get from the API. And then after that, we have the data here. Up. And we have our different groups of pages. If I want to focus on a specific group, so for instance, medium FCP, I can click on the column, and then I will have all the pages with a poor FCP. I can add some data. So you can add here some data about a lot of things. So the depths, the status codes, HTML tags, and things like that. But that's not really the point of today. But if you want, and also you can add GSC data. But since we ingest the file, we can add more data about Core Web Vitals, and then be able to take action with that. You can export the data here. But which is really interesting with that experiment is that there is not a huge impact on ranking right now on that specific sample of URLs. So if I go to that part, with my segmentation, I can see the ratio of ranking pages in the structure regarding the FCP score. And you can see that, so on that sample, I don't have high FCP pages, but for medium FCP and poor FCP, you can see that the poor FCP has more ranking pages than the medium FCP. So it means that for now, there is not a huge correlation on the rankings on that specific sample. But I also did the experiment for other clients, and I don't see a huge impact. This also has been confirmed by, I don't recall his name, but he's from Backlinko. I'm sure you know Backlinko. And he said that, so it was 6 months ago, and he said that there is not a huge impact. So the site speed is not an important ranking factor right now. So it's again more about optimizing the user experience, and also you know that if you have pages that load more, that takes more than 3 seconds to load, you will lose some users that you would be able to keep if you do some work on the page speed. So it's more about optimizing the users that you get on the website right now, and not getting more users, because page speed would be a ranking factor. So I go back to the presentation. Stop sharing here. Okay. And then, all right. So last part, how to fix. The first thing would be to optimize your images. So most of the time, websites have a hero image, and it could be not optimized. So you may want to make it appear within the LCP threshold by compressing it or converting it to a more efficient format. You should also, if you have a lot of sites images, you should evaluate them to see if you can spot some specific issues on that. You should always include a width and a height attributes on your image and video elements, because it avoids sudden shifts in your layout. So remember the example with the button. If you click on the button and it takes some time to load, and you misclick the button because of that, it would be because of the images that are not optimized. Then you could, depending again on the size of the websites. Today I tried to be general, because I'm sure that we have small website owners too. So for them, a good thing could be to upgrade their web hosting, because a faster server response time will improve all your metrics across the board, and it will also shorten your JS execution time and minimize the delays in user interactions. Also prioritize above default content. So the content that users immediately see before scrolling down is what catches the most attention. So you should be careful with that and try to optimize that. And then optimize and render your above default content first, and defer non-critical JS. You should keep creating and optimizing your content, because as Google itself says, grid page experience doesn't override having grid page content. And we saw that with my experiments. For now, the content has still a huge impact on the rankings. So you should keep creating and optimizing the content. And there will still be a room for high quality content, even with lower speed performance. Then you should monitor mobile responsiveness. So mobile first indexing applies to every single website since last month. And pages that show intrusive interstitials provide a poorer experience to users than other pages where content is immediately accessible. And as an instance, I have a client that have websites which has around 150 million of pages, and he had a penalty 2 months ago because he used intrusive interstitial. And then when you have a penalty, it's harder to recover from it and to get traffic. So if you have, so if you are a media website with intrusive interstitials, I would recommend to work on that ASAP, because it has a huge impact on the traffic and on the page experience. And that's it for today. There is documentation here to help you. So if you have WordPress websites, Ahrefs did a use case last week, which is really, really good. You should read it. We have page speed optimization tips on Moz. The content is really good. Then you have the Core Web Vitals on Google. You have my scripts on Google Colab here. And we also have an article more specifically on the use of OnCrawl to optimize the page speed. So time for Q&A. Just before that, I wanted to say that we have right now virtual summits with OnCrawl. So today and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And we have an AMA session with John Mueller tomorrow. So feel free to join. It's free. Thank you. Time for questions, I think.
Clément, thank you so much for your amazing presentation. And we have one question. I can read it for you if you like. Or Clément, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm reading your question right now.
Okay.
Do you think these three factors will change in the future, just like the page speed metrics that get updated every once in a while? If so, what could be some other factors that they might take into consideration as a part of Core Web Vitals?
Good question. So yeah, I think that it will change in the future. When you use the API, you already have, and in my file also, I had the example. You have already other metrics that they pull. So I don't remember the different metrics, but you have them on the API, and I think that they will add those different metrics in the future. So yeah, and for instance, yeah, what can I use? We could have a metric, and it's kind of already the case, but a metric that measures the impact of advertising on the page. And maybe it could be parts of the page experience in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And